yes, I was going up. Just, anyway, first thing one of the things I thought about at breakfast was maple syrup. And Elmer would remember that we were going to collect sap from the maple trees. We probably had trees about like this on our ditch banks, and a lot of them were maple. So we went down along the ditch bank with, usually, I guess, we needed little tubes. So we had old ballpoint pens with the insides taken out, or mechanical pencils or whatever, and drill little holes and get Dad's brace and bit, drill little holes in it. Hang a tin can over it, and I guess we wanted to do it to the big maples out front, but Dad didn't want us drilling holes, but we probably got a couple in there. And we probably got almost a tin can full of stuff, and we built a little fire on the feed room floor of the chicken house there, and boiled this stuff down and got enough to taste. Then Elmer heard somewhere you could get maple syrup out of corn cobs. So I don't remember quite what that process was, but we ground up these corn cobs, cooked those babies, and I did get some that taste just a little bit sweet on that syrupy stuff. Okay. No, we didn't.
Oh, Daddy. No.
Patient enough to wait for that. We're always building stuff up. Since we're on the ditch bank anyway, we're supposed to be cutting ditch bank trees, I think, down, if you go straight up from what's now his garage, right on down the ditch. When you get down near the woods, Elmer and I cut down a bunch. Mary was in on that, or Ruby in on that or not. Bunch of pine trees, and we made an actual log cabin,
Wow.
just, logs right on top of each other all the way around. It was probably about, I think it was this high. And door in it. Did we have a window? We might have had one window in it. And then we put small logs across the top and branches and picked up pine shots from the floor of the forest there, and had a roof. And we wanted badly to have a fire in this thing, do our cooking and all there. And they would not let us have a fire in there. But we probably did once in a while. You guys can imagine what a tinderbox we had there sitting on the edge of the
Or we come in with a little bottle of Paregoric. The stuff was in a little medicine jar. You couldn't get very much volume. I mean, you couldn't take much. Just a tablespoon or two would be your maximum dose. And she gave me 2 adult aspirin to swallow with that Paregoric. I'd always get the aspirin stuck in the back of my throat and wash it down with anything. And I had the Paregoric and the aspirin in my mouth. And I would retch and carry on. The lady grabbed me by the shoulders one time. If you don't stop acting like this, I'm just going to let you lay here and die. Another fun time I had in Chrisfield Hospital was a result of a rather great accident that we had. We didn't have a wagon to haul things in from the fields. We had a big sled, and we would pile stuff up on the sled and use the sled. And one day we were bringing in straw from the backfield, and it was Walter and Elmer and I. And as soon as we got all the straw in, we could go swimming. And we had this sled just really piled high. And Elmer and I were on top of the sled, as I recall, and Walter was driving. And we got just about to the ditch, the first ditch that goes down towards the chicken houses, Carl Green's chicken houses. And Walter stopped to shift gears to put it in another gear. And when he did, the weight of the sled just stopped everything really quickly. And the whole load of straw fell forward. And unfortunately, I was on the front of it. Elmer was on the back, and I sailed through the air with all the straw and landed right on the back of the tractor. hit the seat with my mouth and hit the part where you put the stabilizer bars, hit that in my belly. And then the straw and Elmer landed on top of me. And I remember coming to hearing Walter hollering, "I've killed him, I've killed him."
Aww.
Anyway, they got me to Chrisfield Hospital. And they took me back, and I was at this very, very impressionable stage in my life where such things as your own privates were your own and nobody else was supposed to look at them. And they laid me back on the x-ray table, stark naked on my back.
Aww.
And everybody disappeared.
How old were you? How old were you?
I don't know. And they left me lying there. Well, I had to pee so bad. And I was laying there just bare stark naked on this cold black table having to pee. And I hollered out a couple times and nobody came. And finally I saw one of the male orderlies walk by the door and I hollered at him again. And I told him I really, really had to pee. And he went and got me a Maxwell House coffee can. And I don't know whether any of you have ever tried to pee in a Maxwell House coffee can lying flat on your back.
Why did you have to lie on your back all
But I
night?
did.
Why
So
couldn't
they told me to look, that I had to absolutely lay there. And I was hurting pretty bad anyway. So I held the coffee can down here, took my fingers off of it, and sprayed all over the head of the x-ray machine.
Stick it down in the coffee can?
Then I laid there on this flat, cold, black, bare stark naked, with it dripping.
Lives with rain. A tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. There's one more I missed. A tree that made in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And the entire class clapped. And little Danny boy walks up to the desk and he pulls out his hand, and there is the shiny silver gleaming quarter. And I clutch it in my hand, and I go to lunch, and I get my spaghetti dinner.
Aww.
I think I went ahead and ate my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think I either tried to give my bologna sandwich away, or I actually pitched it.
Wow.
Bar? Alright, then it was Bar. Anyway, he grabbed the tape and just pulled it off. And that poor child just screamed and hollered. Then he grabbed the alcohol and put 4x4 gauze on it and washed his back. And he just cried and cried. That was the most cruel thing that ever happened to Billy. I didn't.
Why were you in the hospital?
He had a hernia. He had a hernia operation when he was about 4 or 5. 5, Bill?
I was 5.
So,
Wow.
and we went to see the different mission sites, and we went out to Oaxaca, where George and Grace Miller were. And of course they had an outhouse, but they told us to be careful to check in it before we went in because of snakes or the tarantula spider and scorpions. And so I waited, and I knew that I wasn't going to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and go outside in that. So I went out just when it was getting dark, And I never saw a burro or donkey, whatever you call it, in the field or anything. But I got in the toilet and I showed my flashlight around to see if there was any snakes or scorpions or anything. And I was just had pulled my clothes up and my underwear down and back to sit on the seat when all of a sudden the donkey let loose behind the toilet. And I went tearing out. I didn't know what the girl was doing. I went tearing out, running toward the house with my doors down. That was one of my
Scary moments. Wow.
scary moments.
But it was dark. Nobody saw it. That's okay. You're fine.
Well, then it got you, tried to the snake or the spider?
I'd never heard of donkey break before, but I was sure whatever it was getting me. Yes, and the little dog's tail began to wag, wag, wag.
Farm kid, well, 3 young farm kids getting off the bus, and we tried to get a taxi, and we could hardly get a taxi to take us to that address. And finally, these guys said, well, look, you guys look like some really clean cut kids, and I don't know what on earth you're doing going to that address in this city, but I'll take you as long as you promise that once you get there on that street, you just get there, open the doors, and lock the doors behind you, and I'm taking off. You make sure you have all your moving parts out of the car.
He dropped us off several blocks from the actual address. He wouldn't take us right
Well, where were the 40 children? Well, they all got picked up at the
bus.
At the bus, that's
They
where,
all got picked up.
yeah, our responsibility ended at the bus station.
But you were spending the night with Nunez family? Okay.
What was that like?
So we got there and it was the projects in the Bronx. And we got there and we ate dinner, and I remember they were going to a church, some kind of evangelical church that night, and wanted us to go with them, and we went to the service. And at 10 o'clock that night, we were down running along the Hudson River with all these Puerto Rican kids, having a great time. And we didn't have any fear at all of all the stuff the taxi driver was telling us about. We felt really protected and safe, didn't we? I know I did. I don't know how Dan felt.
Wasn't that when we connected with Frankie King?
Oh, that might have been.
Somehow, in fact,
That must have been.
somehow we connected with Frankie King and he took us through the city. That's when I was scared when I was riding with Frankie King because he'd been a taxi driver in New York City prior.
And he was
I'm never so
colorblind.
scared in my life as riding a
Yeah, that's right,
cousin,
our
cousin
cousin.
Frankie.
And he was colorblind, and he memorized the colors of the red lights, and that's how he would get through.
Oh,
And
no.
the way he passed his taxi driver test in New York was he stood back and memorized the guy's answers to the color test. And then he passed it, but that was very small. You know any more to
That's how
add?
many more taxi drivers would know that.
I don't remember that at all.
Around New York, you wonder.
That's your job. Well, you know, the wonder was
You wonder what we do with our kids. You wonder what we do with our kids.
By the time we were 18, we'd already lived away from home at least 18 months, basically, and supervised going back and forth.
You remember that?
No.
I remember you not being very happy about it and fussing about Ruth Evie getting this whole plan together. You weren't very happy about it, Mother. I remember that. It was like Ruth Evie and her big ideas. I remember that.
Mother, you weren't very happy about Ruth Evie sending off your kids to New York.
You didn't like the idea. Yes.
Yes, it was Ruth Evie.
You didn't
So
like
I
it.
still have time to tell a couple more adventure
I don't
stories?
even remember that it happened.
Go ahead.
Okay, you're talking about mother and adventure stories. I need to tell you the story about Grandma and Grandpa going to Honduras in 1983. I heard they were going to be down and visiting Dan and Jeanette over Christmas, so I called up and said, hey, can't you just come over to Honduras for a week?
Where were they going?
They were in with Dan and Jeanette in Miami. So we got a ticket. I don't know if that's the time they got the tickets and all that, but anyway, we won't go into that.
I remember we had to go to the embassy and
Right. It was hard to get them, but they finally got them. And what it was one of those times that I had to be in like 10 different places in 8 days.
One of those times?
Yes. And I just,
narrows it down, doesn't it?
I just took Mom and Dad. What'd you say?
I said, that really narrows it down.
And so I told Mom and Dad, I said, you can come on the trip with me. So I met them in San Pedro Sula. You were out in Mosquito, I think. This is before we had robbed. This was a month before we got robbed. We had no idea we were getting robbed. Grandma and Grandpa went back to the States. A month later, we had a baby, and they were wondering why we hadn't waited to have them come down to meet us. But anyway. So I met them in San Pedro Sula, and we had gotten in late, and the last bus had left for Ceiba. So we talked to some other passengers, and we were able to rent a taxi and ride down to San Pedro Sula, which was 3 hours to La Ceiba. And I had to ride in the back seat between Mom and Dad, and with suitcases packed, and 2 people were up front. Anyway, we got in Ceiba. I can't remember the whole scenario, but I think we were there overnight, and then we jumped on a bus and went out to the ranch. And out the ranch, we had to ride horses out to the ranch, and then we came back. And I remember our car broke down, and we had going back out to pick up a small plane. And we had to hitchhike out, and we just made it to the Strip as the airplane came to Toccoa to pick us up and take us to Mosquito.
A bus came back, picked us up while a taxi we had broke down.
Well,
I was on that part.
Not
about our first trip.
No, this was the trip in 80-something. I'm getting to your river trip. That's what I wanted to tell them. Back before it was real popular to do the river raft and Grandma and Grandpa visits. And this is what I wanted to tell you about. But I had to preface it. So we got on this small airplane. We went out to the Mosquito. We were out in Mocoron, which is in a refugee camp. And we had this friend that lived there, and she went up the river every day. And she said we could go with her on this boat. She was a Japanese girl looking for an organization. And she said we could go on this big boat that took refugee supplies up every day. And she had 2 or 3 friends that had big boats that she was sure they would bring us back to the river that day. So Grandpa and Grandma said, yeah, we'll go with you. So we took off, and we went up in this dugout canoe, sitting on top.
40-foot long dugout with about 20 people in it.
Oh, yeah, and we had all kinds of beans and rice and everything like that. We got up to this town about 3 hours up, and all the people with big boats were out for the day.
Shoot.
Yeah, we had to get-
25 horsepower outboard on
Yeah.
where the water was deep enough, where it was too shallow, the passengers got out and pulled the boat with a rope tied to it.
And so we had to be down there that afternoon because we were being picked up for our next trip, wherever we were going. I don't even remember the itinerary anymore. But we had a really tight schedule, so we had to get back down there. So we were asking around how we could get back. To walk down, it would have taken us a day through the jungle. So finally, we found these 3 little boys that were 7, 9, and 11, and they had a dugout canoe just big enough for Grandpa and Grandma and I to sit on. And the boys' pole, they had one in each end and one in the middle.
They're flat dugouts, and in each end they have a little bit of a platform where they stand.
And so we didn't have anything to sit on, so they chopped banana trees down and made little seats for Grandpa, Grandma, and I to sit in this dugout canoe. And the water level came right up that close. And it was the biggest one we could find in the village, so we had to take it. And Granny didn't know how to swim. I guess she still doesn't. And I was really nervous because we had to go down over a lot of rapids. And
You
we
didn't
were
have any
these little
life
girls.
preservers down
Oh, no. Not
Didn't
a
know
life
what those
preserver.
were. That didn't make sense.
And so we started coming down through the rapids, and we had some pretty white water. And I remember praying a lot that day. And then Granny was getting hot because it was like a jungle, but then we were like around noon, and it was getting really hot. So they pulled over to the side of the river and cut some banana leaves for Granny and Grandpa to have as umbrellas, and they were sitting there in this canoe with the banana leaves for umbrellas. And a couple times we almost turned over, and I was trying to figure out who I was going to grab, and I just figured Dad would have to go for it, and I tried to get Mom by the hair and pull her to the side or something. I didn't know she'd even be alive after the plunge to pull anywhere. But anyway, we made it all the way down with these 3 little guys, and paid them, what, $10, or it wasn't even that much. Paid them $1 a piece or something like that. They took us all the way down, and we made it. that was, talking about adventures, that was one of the sillier things I think of, more the risky things I've done.
I'm up on river.
But anyway, I've done a lot of risky things in my life, but it was the first time that I'd really put my parents to.
Take us out. Of course, we had a lot of interesting other trips too, but this is the most special one because we had to ride muleback for 4 hours.
Wow.
And there were 5 of us and 3 mules. Wasn't that it? 5 of us and 3 mules. And I stayed on the mule all the time, on that mule, one mule. And the other 4 changed off. So I rode 4 solid hours. I said all my horseback riding when I was young gave me the groove. And therefore I could ride those 4 hours.
Grandma's river.
I didn't have the calls to the little rooms or the back houses like I did then, like I do now. Or I would have been able to ride 4 hours without getting off, but I did it. And the last part, you remember, Dan? The last part, you said thus on the mules, just let the mules follow their way, and you guys walked on ahead. And the mules took us to the destination.
Some of it was dark, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was dark.
Some of it was, the last part of the trip was after dark.
We went into the river dark and up the river on the mule.
And I had no flashlight, I just kind of knew my way by foot, and the mules followed.
You would have been Rosemary's age.
How many of them did that? How many of them did that?
This is junk.
You never did.
Mother,
Did what?
you would have been
4 hours on
Rosemary's age when you did it.
They were in 73, so I'd have been 56.